Hi, I'm Lucie Shorthouse, and you are watching the Permanent Rain Press.
Hi everyone, it's Chloe with the Permanent Rain Press. Today I'm happy to be joined by Lucie Shorthouse. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And so is the cat, who is currently off screen but wants so desperately to make an appearance.
Some star power we got going on there. They want to hog the spotlight. What's their name?
This one's Amber, and then her sister's called Fluffy. I didn't name her Fluffy; she came with that name but she is very fluffy. But I have more of an imagination than just Fluffy. But yeah.
Love those names. Well, I mean, hopefully they'll make an appearance. I guess we'll have to wait and see. But I'm really excited to chat with you about a couple of current exciting projects of yours. But before we dive into those, I know that your family moved from Kenya to England, and that's where you were born and raised. So, as a mixed race individual and artist, how did your culture shape who you are today?
Um, I think I was always raised with a sense of my culture for sure. You know, there were certain Swahili phrases we'd say in the house. My so my dad was born in Kenya, but his mum is from Uganda. So this is kind of Ugandan Kenyan sort of mixed hybrid kind of culture. But my Ugandan nan moved over to the UK, I think by the time I was like 4 or 5, so I kind of grew up around that culture. But I think I grew up in a predominantly white area. So it was something that I didn't quite explore until, or quite acknowledge and fully appreciate and celebrate until I was older, until I'd moved to London actually. And it's such a multicultural hot pot that I saw people who looked like my family. Lots and lots of people who look like my family. So I've got to really appreciate it there. But I'm so proud of my heritage. And my nan is my Ugandan nan. She's 84. She's just an absolute like legend, and she's the one I watch most of my things with first. Like if it's like something's airing for the first time, I usually watch it with her. So yeah, very proud. But it's a weird thing being mixed. I think you sometimes have to negotiate both cultures, and certainly when there's things going on in the world, certain issues, you don't want to be seen to be betraying one side over the other, but you have to advocate for your marginalized side of your family. But yeah, I'm so proud.
I love that you watch your projects with your nan, and it's just like that family connection and how important that is for you. I imagine it must have been hard, like kind of growing up and not seeing that visibility, but there's nothing better than that, getting in touch with those cultures, like you mentioned when you moved to London and you were a bit older. I mean, what are some of the things that you discovered that maybe you hadn't known or learned when you were younger?
I have this very vivid experience of when I first moved to London and I got on a bus. I looked round and I was with my housemates, so three white, just happened to be white, three white girls. And I was like, oh my God, they're the only white people on this bus. And it was just a revelation to me that I was in a city where there was just brown and black bodies just, around. And it's so important. And I remember that so vividly, like it was yesterday, that it just shows you how important that visibility is. I didn't really know I was missing that part of myself until I experienced that. Do you know what I mean? You don't quite know what you're missing until you recognize what you've missed. But I know for me, the shows that were pivotal to me growing up and that kind of made me want to particularly get into comedy were shows like Sister Sister, Fresh Prince, Keenan and Kel. And again, it was particularly Sister Sister. It was, they're mixed race girls. And I remember me and my sister would just love this show because we saw ourselves, we saw our curly hair, we saw our skin, we saw the kind of the humor that's so distinct to Black culture. And so I know that visibility was important, even though I didn't quite acknowledge it at the time. But the fact that those are my shows that really shaped me shows how much that visibility did really matter actually at that point. Yeah.
And for you now, I'm sure getting to actually be in this creative space where you can be kind of that visibility to maybe young actors coming up and seeing you on screen is something that's so important. What can you share about your background in the arts? Like, when did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in this field?
I started dancing at the age of 6. I was very, very shy as a child, and my parents kind of put me, and my sister was always very rambunctious, and then it kind of reversed. But they kind of put us into dance classes, I think, to just get off some energy. And I realized how much I loved being on stage, and my mind's very noisy and busy a lot of the time. But when I'm on stage or performing, it kind of goes quiet. And I think that's so important when you're, again, people call it, Oprah calls it, you're in a state of flow or whatever. I don't know however people term it, but I think that's an indicator that that's something for you to pursue, because you're in your element in some way. And again, I was so shy, so I'd never really articulated that was what I wanted to do. I knew I just wanted to perform, whether it was me being a pop star, I wanted to be in a girl band, I wanted to do it all. But yeah, there was quite a few singers on my dad's side of the family, but there was no one acting. But my parents always were so supportive. They let me go to, be part of the school plays, which meant that they'd have to pick up my sister at one time, then pick me up at another time after school. And they never really complained about it because they knew how much I enjoyed it. But yeah, I've always wanted to do it. But then I went to university, which was very academic university, and I kind of went as a compromise to not, waste my brain, as my parents put it. But I still ended up wanting to do it. So it's one of those things. I feel like if you're meant to do something, you find your way, even if you kind of maybe take a detour, and you will find your path. But it's not easy, and I was always warned it wasn't easy, and I was always warned to have a backup, hence the university. So my parents were very smart in that aspect of preparing me for how difficult the profession is, I think.
You graduated with, was it an English and drama degree?
Yeah. I mean, miraculously, like, honestly, if I think back now, like I got a 2-1 as well. So, I did quite well, but my brain's just, it's just gone. But, and again, I was at uni where there was a lot of drama. I didn't realize there was a lot of drama when I went, because I thought, right, I'm going to pursue the academic side. I'm going to get a normal job. And then I fell back into it again, serendipitously. And then, it just so happened that helped me then realize I needed to go to drama school and still pursue this. But yeah, the fact that I did English and drama as well, that was the kind of compromise of like, okay, I'm using my brain, but I still get to experience the drama. So it's always been a part of me. Yeah.
Well, I love how supportive your parents were, especially, and kind of just maybe guiding you a little, but saying, okay, we'll let you go off and have this journey, which you did. And it seems to be working out pretty well for you now. You starred as Pritti Pasha in Everybody's Talking About Jamie, which was your West End debut. Tell me about the significance of this role for you and what you took away from this production and your character.
Twofold in terms of what I think the character means and what that show means for people, and how transformative it is and how important the narrative is, in allowing people, again, we talked about visibility, allowing people to feel seen. And then also, just for me, that was my first job out of drama school, the workshop for the show. So I'll address that part first, because that was my first job. I went into it so naively. I didn't really know anything. I was and it kind of trickled along and gathered momentum and became this huge thing, which is a really lovely thing, because I never approached it with a sense of knowing or strategy or, this is how I want my career. It was just, oh wow, what a beautiful experience. Oh, and it's growing, which I think is the best way to approach stuff in this industry, because it's from a pure place. So yeah, that was lovely, because I grew so much as a person, as a performer. I just learned so much, and I've always wanted to sing in a show, but I never trained in musical theatre. So it was another kind of weird lovely happenstance thing of like, oh wow, I get to combine that passion with the acting. And so that was lovely. But in terms of, so the show is about an openly gay school kid who has this passion for he wants to be a drag queen. And you've got to remember this was I graduated, so 2015 was the workshop for it. I think there was a previous workshop before that. So Drag Race had sort of, it was fizzing away, but it wasn't the phenomenon that it is now. So that vulnerability and wanting to admit that was a passion, it wasn't as like trendy or as visible as it is now. So I feel like the story had a lot more maybe resonance at that time. Sorry, not resonance. I don't know, it felt more profound that someone would want to pursue that, whereas now we grow up watching Drag Race, we love the makeup, there's tutorials that, it's a whole culture now that we're familiar with. So yeah, it's about a kid who wants to be a drag queen, and he's got his best friend Pritti, who I played, who is Muslim, very academic. And again, on paper, you'd think, how does an openly gay kid who loves sequins and drag and showbiz wind up best friends with someone who's academic, very reserved, is modest in her persona? How do they get to become friends? But you've got to remember they're two outsiders in this crazy world that actually they find that commonality. And the amount of like lovely messages we've received from people saying, I came out to my parents because of this show, or this song helped me get through this time, or this song was I played your song at my cousin's funeral, like things like that. It's incredible the effect it's had. And even now I still get messages about that show. And as an actor, you hope to be employed, but you hope to do work that is important and provokes thought, encourages change. And that show definitely did that. And I'll forever be grateful that was my start. I've actually got the shoes, the Jamie Red shoes. They're on my like display at the moment. They're always there because it's just a lovely reminder of how great that show was. And again, an openly Muslim character in musical theatre hadn't really been done, or even just in the context of theatre, a hijabi woman. It was usually tales of oppression, sadness, rather than this sense of joy. And again, we need those narratives that deal with the very real oppressive side, considering everything that's going on in the world at the moment. We definitely need those narratives, but we also need to celebrate the other aspects of humanity within Muslim culture, which is joy and autonomy and agency and empowerment. So to get to be part of that was great.
I love that you got to exercise your vocal skills without any training. I was listening to a couple of old SoundCloud covers that you did. I think it was like 9 years ago. You had like Whitney Houston's How Will I Know? And I'm Not the Only One by Sam
Are they
Smith.
still on there? That
They
is horrifying that they're still on there.
You're like, okay, after this interview, you're gonna go and take them down. But I listened to them and you sounded wonderful. So it's great to kind of exercise those vocal chops when you get the opportunity to. And before we move into Rebus, I will note to those watching and listening that we are discussing some spoilers, so make sure that you have caught up on season 1 before continuing. You currently star as Detective Constable Siobhan Clarke. What can you share about your audition process and how you ended up booking this role?
I got the audition through, and I remember I got 2 episodes given to me to kind of prepare, get a bit of context. And it was really late. I tell this story all the time, but I think it's so important because as an actor, you get given scripts and material and you think, it's not always gripping. And I got given these 2 episodes. I thought, I'll just read it like 20 minutes before bed of one. And I had to read to the end of episode 2, to the point I checked my email going, have they sent me episode 3? Because I was that gripped. And so I remember thinking this was a special project and it was well written anyway. And I know that I'd heard of the Ian Rankin novels. I hadn't read them, but I read some extracts to gather the tone of the of that world, really, even though it was adapted by a different screenwriter. But yeah, I had the audition and I just had a good feeling about it. I felt really relaxed and at home. And then I was on another project at the time, which was kind of good because I wasn't obsessing over it. I was too busy on this other thing. I remember I spoke to my agent. I went, look, I've got this good feeling about this show. Have we heard anything? They said, look, you're still in the running. Like, we haven't heard anything, but it's not a no sort of thing. I was like, okay. And then I went in and I booked it. And but it's weird. I had that instinct, and you usually do. You get an instinct about certain roles that might be in your future. And yeah, I was so grateful for it as well, because those books, that canon of work, the Rebus novels, are such a part of Scottish identity and part of the fabric and the culture up there. And I don't know, it just felt really nice to be asked to be part of a pocket of that legacy in some way. And I definitely wanted to do it justice or not disappoint the fans of the books, you know.
You mentioned before that you more so read the source material after filming or when filming was almost completed. So can you take me through a bit of that conscious decision? Like, was there any other source material or adaptations you did refer to prepare and get immersed in this world? And just what was your thought process with what's out there for this series?
It's difficult because the part of me that was like so grateful for the opportunity and really wanted to do a good job thought, I've got to read all the books. Like, it's only right that I fully get an appreciation of what I was asked to be participating in. But firstly, I didn't have enough time. I just didn't have enough time. I've come from one job onto another. But then also two things, that you can get overwhelmed with how much source material there is. And I think Sir Ian Rankin, the writer, would even attest to this, that across the canon of work, the characters evolve and they change. And so it's almost like, which version of Siobhan would I then select? And would that be in alignment with actually what's in the script? So there'd be that of like element of confusion. I also didn't want to betray the instincts and the portrayal that got me the role in the first place. So there was that, but also my character's new to the scene, so it's almost like the less I know of the world, the better, because as a me, the actor, but also as the character, she doesn't know this world. She is disorientated. She has to learn and perceive everything in real time. So it was almost useful for me, because I didn't know that world as a Siobhan, for me not to know all the details that are within the books. But again, like I said, I really wanted to get an appreciation of the work. So I read these extracts. I kind of read the novel where she kind of comes into it. I read some extracts where their friendship dynamic was kind of in there. So I could just get a sense of how to maybe play. Again, because Gregory was so great, who wrote the show, he was open to things. So, you know, if there was elements where we can invite a bit more humor or a bit more of a rapport between me and, you know, Richard, who plays Rebus, we would do that. But yeah, it's a tough balance, because you want to appreciate what you've been asked to be part of. And again, if I was a fan of these books, I'd think, at least the little thing that actor could do, at least they could have read the books. You know, I understand that. So it's only we're about a few weeks away from wrapping that I felt like I know this character now, so I can read the books, which sounds really counterintuitive. But I felt like I trusted what I'd done in the show already, that now if I read the books, I wouldn't feel confused. And actually what was nice is when I was reading the books, I kind of was able to go, oh yeah, okay, that makes, I saw that alignment. But then, you know, I also saw the differences, but the plot points of season 1 don't adhere strictly to a certain book. So yeah, it's difficult because you want to make sure you're appreciating the legacy, but you're not confusing yourself in just being an actor.
For sure. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think what you said is so true, because you do want to honor the books and this character and what people have, you know, a bit of an understanding for, but you were cast for a reason. So you have to kind of trust your instincts as well and go on this journey with her, rather than knowing, you know, maybe kind of where she starts and where she ends. But for future seasons wise, you have to kind of be in that right mindset. Tell me about your version of Siobhan. Like, how do you see her and her purpose in this series in terms of what led her to the police force? Like, anything you can share. Obviously, these are some things that maybe can be uncovered more in the future, at least in the series, but about her personality traits, her core values, things like that.
So yeah, Siobhan's new to the force, and I think she certainly feels like a fish out of water because she's not Scottish. She is a woman in a predominantly male profession, and she's come up through the ranks in what is perceived as a shortcut to a lot of the colleagues. She's come up through what's called an accelerated leadership pathway, which and it's so to the more traditional members of the force, it's like, oh, these youngsters coming in now, they don't have to earn their way, they get in like this. So there's that barrier she's having to deal with as well. And again, it's not something we've addressed formally in the show, but just the fact that I'm a mixed race woman, the fact that I'm a mixed race woman in what is in that the world you see on screen is predominantly white as well. So I guess there's that element of, again, it's not formally addressed, but it's just visually that's that sense of visibility. It's not in her world, it's not, the people don't look like her family back home maybe. So yeah, and she's really trying to prove herself. I think she's a bit in over her head at the beginning. I think she's overwhelmed with just how difficult and taxing it is, and learning how to decompress at the end of a day. Like we find in episode 2, she goes out and gets drunk, which I think we've all done to kind of maybe soothe ourselves, or whether it's been for good or bad. And she's paired with Rebus, and I think she has to trust that her mentor Jill, her boss, has paired her with him for a reason, because she knows she can handle it. But it's certainly not without its difficulties. He gives her a bit of a hard time, but she doesn't allow herself to be too intimidated, which I think that's what I really wanted to portray. And I think even mentioned this at the audition, that because I think the audition scene was it was the scene we have when me and Rebus, it's in Ep 1 where we're in a cafe and we're kind of having our introductions, and he's asking about her and where she studied at uni and what did she study and stuff like this. And I remember at the audition saying, I don't want her to back down. I want her to kind of be like, I know why he's asking me this, I know he wants to belittle me, but not showing that, not allowing this man to break her, and actually holding her own. And I think hopefully we got that balance right, where you can see that Siobhan is intimidated and reluctant to share everything, but also not willing to be completely not willing to cow down. So I think that's maybe what helped me get it as well, because I was really adamant that portrayal was, we didn't see a woman's sidekick who's just so vulnerable, and actually it's up to the man to do everything. Like I was like, I do not want that. Like, especially if we're setting it in modern day, that might have been more of a gender dynamic when the books were first written, but certainly not today. Siobhan would hold her own. She's the kind of, in my head, she's the kind of character that she would have her poker face on at work, but go to the toilet at work or go home, there might be some tears, there might be a scream, she might be frustrated, but when she's at work, when she's good to go. And it was really important that the female characters in the show, which Gregory was so behind as well, was just as rich and fully formed as the male characters. I don't know if that answered the question. I think I went off on a tangent.
No, but I absolutely love that. I think you did answer it well. And I think it's important as an actor, for you to hone in or focus on something that's so key to your character, which is what you did with kind of that mental fortitude, and kind of building that wall up, probably due to past experiences and interactions she's had in past positions, and going through what she did with the police force. And you mentioned that Gregory Burke was very kind of receptive and open to collaborating on your character. So what are some things you maybe worked on together?
We didn't quite, it wasn't a collaboration as in I was like ringing him up going, I've got a thought, but it was more that, I would be able to voice note him about a certain scene that was coming up, and just either gain clarification or I think it was a certain, I think it was in ep 3, there was a conversation Siobhan has with Malcolm Fox about why she got into the job, and that because I'd known that I'd sat with the character now for like a good 2 months, that I was like, oh, could we just maybe add this in, because I feel like that's the direction of thought now. And he was just so open to it. And even now he's messaged me about it, you know, saying congratulations, and just he's so lovely. And what's difficult is it's still a very male dominated industry. You know, crew wise, creative wise, I'm seeing it more and more, particularly, you know, things like, we're going to talk, but We Are Lady Parts was very female centric, but there's still a very male dominated world. And so you hope that firstly that we redress the balance, but if we're unable to do that overnight, that we have great allies in our male crew who understand and want a dialogue with women on set in terms of how to make sure their characters are written in the voice of a woman. Was this how you would say it? And I think that's so important and such a testament to a good writer or a good collaborator, because I felt like I could do that with Greg. I honestly didn't feel like there was anything on the page actually where I was like, a woman wouldn't say that. And I can always tell if I get an audition and I'm like, who says that? And I go and check and I'm like, written by, and it's usually a male. And I think, well, yeah, there you go. So the fact that he was so open and again, but just so friendly as well, so approachable. I mean, when I first met him, he was like, you've got my number, you've got my email address, anything that doesn't make sense, please, you know, have it be a dialogue. And he wasn't precious about his words. You meet some writers that what's written on the page is gospel. You do not stray, you do not question. And it wasn't like that at all, which was so lovely. And I think why the female characters are able to thrive in the series.
And it's so key, like you mentioned, just to really, if there isn't as much female like representation on set and with the writing team, that they are open to hearing your perspectives. And I think that's so wonderful that he was, and it makes the show kind of what it is as well. Just being open to new ideas. For you, playing a female in a male dominated field like law enforcement, which is still a challenge in today's society, like what was that like? Were you able to speak with any woman in similar positions?
I actually did, because funnily enough, and it was the very opening scene we were filming, one of the supporting artists was an ex-policewoman. And it was just, again, I so believe, I don't think anything is a coincidence in this life, but I'm very one of them, the universe has put us here. I'm one of those wacky people. And I just happened to be paired with this SA supporting artist. And obviously, and the scene was taking a while. So we ended up like chatting for 20, 30, 40 minutes. And she was an ex-police officer who'd retired. And I got to speak to her about her whole career. And again, that difference of the force in terms of the culture of it, gender-wise, from when maybe Rebus might have joined or Jill might have joined, you know, the ex-colleagues, how that culture's changed. And again, that sense of people thinking, oh, she's got it easy now, Siobhan's got it easy now coming into the force, how it is now, because there's red tape around everything. You can't, you know, you can't, that school of hard knocks culture doesn't quite exist in the same way. But I got speaking to this woman, and again, because it was the first scene we basically filmed, it felt like, oh my God, I was meant to meet you because you're my research. Richard also had a friend who was a police officer as well, who came to set for set visits, and he'd teach me about the handcuffs and stuff. So there was definitely support there. But this woman was incredible because she told me about the different areas she worked in the force. And she ended up being a negotiator for people who were in very vulnerable positions. And she just opened my eyes into all the different areas of law enforcement, like you said, and how you kind of find your flow, I guess, within it, find where you best sit. And I think because Siobhan's in the infancy of her career, she's still yet to find, where do I sit? And so she's working that out through season 1 as well. But yeah, this woman was incredible. And it just so happened that she was, I don't know if you call them essays or call them extras still in Canada or in America, but it was just so a beautiful coincidence that I happened to be paired with her. And she just talked me through even just the differences in how she's like, nothing's on notepads, everything's recorded, and really gave me an education that proved so valuable as we went on.
What a wealth of knowledge that was unexpected for you. And again, I'm sure
Right.
getting to also just hear her experiences as a woman in the force for so long, and like that disparity. You mentioned this, that Sir Ian Rankin, he was an executive producer on the series. So what was it like having his trust and involvement? Like, was he made available as a resource at all for you?
Not so much a resource. I'm pretty sure he would have been, but he was someone who would come to set visits. Would He came to our wrap party, came to the screening. He's openly said how much he loved it. So to get that kind of seal of approval from the main man was incredible. And I think it's one of those things that this person sat with these characters for many, many years. So you want to kind of feel that you've done, and again, this is the dilemma with not reading all the book, like every single book before I started, because there's this sense of really wanting to honor this man's work. But the fact that he's loved it and so openly been behind it and really supported the fact that we have moved it to modern day, and we've kind of borrowed certain narratives from certain books, and it's not exactly a mishmash, but it's not strictly adhering to one book, and just been so behind it is great. And again, I feel like that's most good writers I've met are people who aren't too precious about their work, that they go, oh my God, this work can live on. And this narrative is, if a narrative works, it's timeless. So you can transport it. You can, it's like Shakespeare, I'm comparing him to Shakespeare, but you can adapt it into so many different ways because the characters are rich enough that they can withstand it, as are the narrative threads, the mystery, the thrill, the suspense. So yeah, but it's just great to see him like at the wrap parties, at the screening, he's tweeting about it. It's been great because also some writers just give away the rights or whatever, and they're not really involved, or they don't really, I don't know this, but maybe it's just a check to some writers, I don't know. But for him, it was never that sense. He was always just so chuffed to be around when he was on set. Again, it was such a lovely experience because everyone was just, it was such a labor of love. Everyone was so behind it.
There's nothing like, kind of going to the wrap party and being like, this is the creator of this character you played. And, he's so open to maybe talking with you, or just, I love that he was involved with the show because, like you mentioned, I mean, nothing against the people who obviously they might sell their rights, maybe for reasons they don't want to be involved anymore. But it's always very cool to see someone kind of see their project through and feature adaptations. Siobhan is, of course, Rebus's police partner, like we discussed. So, what dynamics can we see between that pair in season one?
There's a bit of push and pull. There's a bit of friction. But there's also a bit of play. I think we have that with that idea of not being intimidated. But even in the scene in the coffee shop, like I mentioned, when he's asking her these questions, she knows where he's going. She's an intelligent, she's smart, she's switched on, she's very sharp. So she knows where his line of questioning's going. So there's a bit of play in there. I think they do grow to really respect each other. Even though but what's annoying is that, with no spoilers, but season one they kind of start to find their groove, and then there's this fracture that happens, and that's because Siobhan has a kind of professional / personal blurring dalliance with another colleague of hers who Rebus doesn't like at all, Malcolm Fox, who works for professional standards, which is completely against Rebus's ethos in terms of he's more outlandish with his methods. And professional standards is all about towing the line, and he's just not about that life. So there's definitely a bit of friction they experience, and it's annoying because it comes just when they start to go, oh, okay, we can work together now. We've got a rapport. So yeah, but it was really fun to film those scenes with Richard though, because and I think maybe it reflects on screen as well, our chemistry is very similar in terms of we're very playful with each other. We're very silly. We're kind of brother and sister like in real life. So it's almost that dynamic on screen, I think, sometimes as well. Like when there's a scene when he picks her up when she's hungover. and it's nice because there's that element of trust and familiarity that they start to build.
The mentor mentee kind of mentality. What's interesting is in the books, there's like it could go so many different ways. Like in the books, it's like, oh, is it emotional? Is it familial? Is it romantic? So there's all those different like kind of aspects that could be touched on. So working closely with Richard, you mentioned that you're both clowns on set, you know, very kind of playful. What can you say about him as a person and as a scene partner, having shared so many scenes and moments with him in season one?
He is just like the best of people. He really is. He's just like everything you'd hope in a human. He's so lovely, but so warm, so charismatic, so smart. Like not like annoying, like because he's like perfect in every way, and you're just like, ugh. But he's just so nice. And also, I think because the job was so lovely, a lot of that is down to who's at the top of the call sheet. You know, they kind of set the tone, and because he's so just down to earth and normal and lovely, like genuinely lovely to every single crew member. And I've experienced sets where, particularly more male dominated sets, when that's not been the case. In fact, it's been the complete opposite. So to see it how I feel like a set should be, and know that it's led by someone who's so generously hearted, was lovely. But yeah, he's an absolute clown. He's silly. And he can joke around and then be like in the scene, and I can't, and I'm still like giggling away. But it's just so lovely. And I'd obviously heard of him, but I'd never watched Outlander, so I didn't quite know what a big deal he was. So when we filmed in Edinburgh, all these like fans swarmed him on the street, and I was like, oh my God, Richard, are you a big deal? Like just trolling him. And I thought, I've got to try and I've got to be nicer to you now. Like you're actually like you're famous. I didn't realize. But just so lovely. And so yeah, I can just WhatsApp him the most random stuff. Just lovely. Yeah.
And what's interesting is he also comes from a theater background as well. So is that something that you ever discussed?
We didn't, but I can tell that he has, because there's a certain approach, I think, that actors who've worked in, not to put down TV actors, but there's a certain muscle that you use when you're in theatre, in terms of you have more time with the script, you have more time rehearsing, but TV is so quick. And sometimes the questions he would ask, it makes him sound difficult if I'm saying he's asking questions, but we'd go through the script in the morning and block our scenes, and he'd always ask like the most intelligent actor like questions, and that's something that I think comes from being in theatre, because you have that time in a rehearsal space to kind of have those questions come up. And but you can sort of tell, because I think you can tell by his performances, because you can't wing what he does. He has this gorgeous scene, I think it's the start of Act 2, when he's having a therapy session, and there's such vulnerability there, that you can tell he's done the work with the text, with the script. He hasn't just learnt the lines, and you know, he had so many lines to learn. And I remember there's one time he had a bit of a break in between, and he was like, I'm going to get to grips with this scene, and just his approach was just so professional that I think you can tell that's come from an old school theatre background. And also he can really sing. I don't know if he's ever been in musicals, but he loves to sing. He sings all the time on set. And I keep saying, like, drop the album, like we need the album. So maybe that, I've always feel like most people who start in theatre, they've got pipes on them that can sing. So yeah, he's also got that.
You're like, it just needs some prodding and encouragement to come out. I mean, maybe Rebus and Siobhan will do a duet in the future, completely out of character, blooper reel, something like that. Tell me about Siobhan's dynamics. Like, how did her dynamics with Rebus differ from her interactions and relationship with Malcolm Fox?
I think with Malcolm, it's kind of strange, because I don't know if this is just the way it panned out in this series in terms of, you know, the pockets of scenes we get with them. But she seems more serious with Malcolm than she is with Rebus. I feel like she can be slightly younger and sillier when she finds her groove with Rebus, but she can have a bit more humor with Rebus. He allows her to be, he's a bit more playful, whereas Malcolm is a bit more again, reflected in his job, a bit more serious with her, and hence why on this night out she kind of ditches him. He's saying, I'll come over. She's like, no, I'm just going to go to bed. And then she ends up going out with a friend, getting drunk. And I think it's that idea that he kind of makes her assume a maturity that she's not quite ready for, or she wants to find that maturity herself and make sure it's on her terms. And likewise, I think that's where the clash comes in, the professional and personal, because she doesn't want anybody. And I think I'd be exactly the same. And most women, I think, in the infancy of their career would think this, because it's so much harder for women to build a reputation from their own merit, that this idea that I don't want anyone to think that I've got this job through my dalliance with you, through the fact that you're an acquaintance, the fact, I want to earn this on my own terms, and I want this to be strictly about me and my hard work. So there's definitely that. So I think she kind of pushes him away, because the job just, it doesn't allow for them both to kind of coexist. And I think Malcolm's very black and white in how he thinks, whereas Rebus, in terms of his approach to things, he's very unpredictable. And I think she kind of starts to align more with that. Understand that the world is grey, and that there's no black and white way to approach anything. You can't always toe the line if you want to get results and you want to solve things. And so I think she starts to warm to Rebus's ways, because it's more effective, I think. And so I think Rebus allows her to be, weirdly, I've never answered this question before, but in thinking about it, I think Rebus allows her to be more playful and herself than Malcolm. The scenes with Malcolm always felt more serious. Yeah.
It's interesting to kind of look back now that you've, filmed the season in its release, and think about how these different people and those interactions with Siobhan kind of dictate her and kind of lead her on different paths. And I mean, gender politics and power dynamics is something that's so often talked about today. And yeah, like you mentioned, as a woman, you really want to do things on your own merit. Like even small associations can impact that. I know that she is part of an emotional tragic moment in episode 2. So without getting into the exact specifics of what happened there, how do you prepare for and approach an emotional scene like that?
I think you just have to kind of lock into the material. I think it's difficult when you're on a set, because there's so many things, so many elements, and everyone's working together to achieve the same thing. And there's a lot of just noise in terms of bodies, everyone's working towards the same thing, but there's a lot of noise and busyness. So I think you have to just find your way into it and find a focus. But I think when the source material is great and the team's great and you trust them, that they allow that to happen, it all happens very easily. And I think it shows, if you struggle to find those emotional moments sometimes the environment doesn't allow you to do it because you don't feel safe in it. But also I always approach, if something's mildly emotional, I remember a really good acting teacher taught me this, is that when you are emotional, you try everything in your power not to be emotional. You don't try and go, you try and stop it. Hence why I said this to someone. I remember a teacher saying this to me as well. If you're ever playing drunk in a scene, when you're drunk, you try everything in your power to act like you are not drunk. Yeah. So it's almost like you have to sort of play the opposite. You work in opposition with, you resist that emotion. That's the most human thing we do. So if you're trying to portray humanity, we don't go, we do everything in our power to combat that and recover, not show our hand. Let me deal with these emotions. I'm going to cry about it later. So it was allowing that conversation to happen with directors and stuff, where you make a choice that you both feel happy about, that feels human, but also feels effective for screen. Because sometimes you have to heighten things for screen because it's got to transmit through the medium. But yeah, I just felt really safe, and I really trusted the material and the given circumstances were so high stakes that I think it was quite easy.
For you, just in general, like coming out of an emotionally challenging day or scene on set, how do you recover and unwind?
I'm so boring. I literally just go home. If I'm home, I'm with my cats and I'm just watching true crime.
So
Don't know what
it's
that
like,
says
oh,
about
that was
me.
rough. Okay, I'm gonna cuddle with the cats and watch more crime
More
happen.
crime. I don't know why, but I really like got into it last year. But maybe it was because when I was filming it, and obviously all the crime cases they cover law enforcement and that idea of everything happening, you've got to find everything out within those first 24, 48 hours. And so that almost was a bit of research for me. But it, in terms of even listening back to how, I know this wasn't the question, but listening back to how law enforcement police officers, how they discuss the events that happened and how they remember it was really useful for me, because I got to see how these people who it's their everyday job, how they actually handle the profession, how they wear that hat but then go home and have a life as well. But yeah, for me, I literally just go home. I mean, there'd be certain nights I'd go, oh, should we have a drink or something? But I'm such an introvert. Like, I'm all full of beans on set. I can be the clown, life of the party. But when my social battery runs out, when we've wrapped, I'm like in bed, either with my cats, FaceTiming my cats, watching comfort shows. I'd watch the same show over again, like Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. That's one of my comfort shows. Ugly Betty, Friends. Like, I'd just watch my comfort shows, or Sister Sister, because that was on Netflix, or watch true crime. I just kind of switch off, or I'd read. I got into reading more as well. But I think you have to. I think you have to find your way. I was filming. I was away from home as well. So, and that can be difficult when you haven't got those familiar surroundings, or say if you're in a hotel or something, it can get kind of lonely. So I can understand how, I said this to my friend at the time, I can understand how people maybe go down more of a self-destructive path of maybe going out for a drink or not wanting to feel so lonely, because it can be quite isolating. But I'm just exhausted by the end of the day, so I'm just like
Well, hopefully you got to like FaceTime your friends and family back home when you were away and kind of still have that support from afar. Which was your favorite episode in season one to film and be a part of, and why?
um I really enjoyed season one just for the scenes with like Richard. I really enjoyed those like first introductions. Like that cafe scene was really, I really had fond memories of doing that. And I loved the way it was shot as well, because we were so compact in this coffee shop, and so it was awkward. And I think the director, even in the edit, fed into the awkwardness of the interaction. It just felt really human. Season two, I loved the stun. I don't know, there's too much, honestly. I feel like there's something out of each episode that I really enjoy, and also enjoyed certain episodes for the different performances of the other actors. And there's a lot of scenes that I wasn't part of, so when I watch it I go, oh my god, you're amazing, because I wasn't there on the day. But yeah, episode 6 as well is obviously, it's the climax of the show, so I think that's a very special one as well.
I think it's fair game to say you just basically enjoyed the journey of it all, and not a specific episode, because you also get to grow with your character and see this narrative play out. What are some of your favorite behind the scenes moments from set? And this could be like a funny moment or overall comments just about your experience working with the production and crew, which, as you mentioned before, was very positive for you.
I think my favorite ones were whenever we had office scenes, we'd be in that same room. So usually we'd be filming lots of different locations, maybe in one day. So the day would kind of switch up a lot. But there was that like 1 week we filmed where we did all the office scenes. So you're kind of in this one room for the whole day. And so you kind of go a bit doolally. And so me and Richard would like play the most stupid games, and like you've got to say the lyrics of a song in a really like in not the way guess the lyrics of a song. And then we'd sing Backstreet Boys all the time. He's a massive Backstreet Boys fan like me, massive Spice Girls fan like me, so we'd just be singing all those songs, leaving each other silly little notes in our desks for them to open in the middle of the scene, just silly things like that. So I've got really fond memories. Whenever I look at those office scenes, I just know that like how the mischief we got up to in that on those days. So for me, maybe those were the fun ones. But I also remember the first ever scene I shot with Richard, because I was nervous. I came in, we even laughed about this the other day. I came in all guns blazing, and he said you were like a little like Yorkshire Terrier, like like this at him, because I was nervous, and I was completely like like I was just terrified because it was my first day really filming. And he said, and he could tell I was nervous though, because he kept going, "Are you all right, Luce? Are you all right? Oh, it's just no, I was just checking. Are you all right?" And he just kept playing into how nervous I was. So when I look back at that scene now, I just laugh thinking about how much I was sweating, and he could tell how much I was sweating with nerves. So yeah, it's more the kind of those little, the more mundane the scene is, the more mundane it is offset. So you have to find your own ways to amuse yourself. So those are the ones that I watch going, oh God, I remember that day.
For those who have not yet tuned into Rebus, why would you recommend they give the series a chance?
It's just a really well made, I think, crime thriller. The fact that these books have endured for so long is because the characters are great and the circumstances are fantastic, and we've reflected that, I think, in the series. It also deals with, there's a lot of social commentary in there that's not explicit, but there's circumstances that lead people towards crime, that, and I think we don't always get that in a crime show, that we don't see the humanity behind the circumstances. We just see the thrill and the blue lights and this happening, flashing, and we see that, but we don't see the very human side. And again, that great, beautiful grey human area of what leads people to make these choices and how unfortunate those can be. And I think that's why Rebus is so great, because he works in that grey area where he can see those things. And it does deal with how we treat our veterans. Sorry, my dad's ringing me. It deals with how we deal our veterans in the UK, and I think it would speak to any audience around the world. How we, the poverty, how we, how the lower classes are, that lack of social mobility. I think it's really urgent in that way, because I feel like those circumstances are more rife now than ever. So I think it's got a really universal aspect. It doesn't preach those things, but I just watch it and go, wow, this is an urgent story of this time, and not just in Scotland, but I think everywhere, unfortunately. But I think the characters are great. I think people are going to fall in love with Rebus because he's a bit of an anti-hero. He's our obviously titular character, he's protagonist, he is our hero, but he's not perfect. And I think now we want those messy human title characters. We're not interested in this pristine version of someone. We want that mess. And I think people will really take to that, I think.
I think just getting to see some of those flaws, like you mentioned, and meet these characters and kind of go through that process of why they did what they did, is something that's so valuable, just in storytelling as well for viewers and for the actors. If you are renewed for a second season, what are your hopes for Siobhan and the future of Rebus, like narrative wise, for your character and her growth in the police force?
I would love to see her take more of a Rebus approach, which I think's hinted at the end of season 1. So if we did get another season, which, can I just say, we're all dying to do it again, but like, yeah, and again, you don't always get that. You do a series and sometimes you think, well, that's the door closed. Lovely people, but if I don't see them again, not the end of the world. But with this, we all loved it so much. We would just, every single person would love to go for another series. But I would love to see Siobhan take on more of Rebus's philosophy and his ways, and find her ways of gathering intel, or find her little more, those maverick ways. I hope she would explore those a bit more, which I think we started to get towards the end. Like there's a interrogation scene in episode 6, hopefully season 6 one day, but episode 6, where I think you see her growth, actually, because she wouldn't have had that confidence to interview someone in that way in episode 1. So I think I just want to see her step into her power a bit more and take more risks, which again would make her less of a hero, more anti-hero. I think that's interesting to explore. And I think I want to keep seeing the friendship building. Well, not exactly friendship so much, but that partnership with Rebus building more and more, because their trust has been fractured. I want to see them find that rapport again, I think.
For you, are you someone who likes to read reviews and comments, or do you stay away from critics and online discourse? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And if you have seen any positive messages and comments, what has that meant to you?
It's really hard because I think it comes from theatre as well. When you get these reviews and you do a press night, that you can't, if you believe a bad review, you've got to believe a good review and vice versa. And you realize how polarizing art is, and you can't please everybody. So there's this sense of you don't want to seek it out, but it's that inevitability, sorry, that you know it's out there. So there's that demon inside you that wants to go looking, and I have done that and been disappointed because people will just forget that you are on the other end of reading that, and so your just comment will be received. And the majority, I've had about 99% beautiful comments from people, and people genuinely loving the series, but it's that 1% of negativity that plays on you, that you internalize, that's the only one that kind of matters, because it plays on your insecurities. And I think, if you're in this industry, you're naturally in a state of insecurity because it's so tough. But I've had really beautiful messages of people, and I try and stick to those and not seek out the bad stuff. You get sent nice reviews. My friends are so lovely. They will go, "Oh my God, did you see you got this in this publication?" So I do that, but I try not to invest how I view a job and my worth on those things. And I've learned very early on to go, what did I learn from that experience? And what did what was the overall spirit of that show being made? That's the real victory. But there has been some, just going back to like the questions of being mixed, actually, there's been, because Siobhan is white, well, perceived white in the books. And I kind of anticipated that it might not go down well with certain maybe fans of the books, or because I've read books where you get disorientated because you have a view of what the character looks like or how they act, and then you see them on screen and you go, okay. So I understand that initial, and I just anticipated that there would be some comments about the new race of Siobhan, and there's been some, which is disappointing. I think those are the ones that, again, it's a tiny minority, I can't stress enough, but those are the ones that play on you more, because again, it's something I can't change, and it's something I'm so proud of. So call me ugly on screen, which people have, say that I can't act, say that I'm unconvincing, go with those things, because it is what it is, but don't attack my identity, or say that I only got the role because we're trying to be woke or whatever. Those have been slightly upsetting. So but I don't regret seeing those comments, though, because it's important for me to understand that is still very real, and how much further we've got to go in the fact that I'm a light-skinned mixed race woman. I have light-skin privilege. I will never understand the full aspects of racial prejudice because I've got a European side, but it's important for me to understand that if I'm getting it and I look the way I do, then what about someone who is fully of their ethnicity? What would that mean? So it's important that I understand what that is, and I'm not naive about it, and that it makes me more empowered to be part of a change and part of visibility. So one day people don't go, oh, they go, okay, why not her? But that's been a tiny minority. But I did want to speak to that because obviously we spoke about my identity at the start, and I don't want to erase those things because they're very real things that go on, and it's not just with me. It goes on with a lot of actors and actresses who have a bit of melanin in them. So yeah, those have been the ones that, in terms of reviews or feedback, that I think is disappointing. But otherwise, honestly, the feedback, people have really, really loved it, or people have gone, I just watched the first episode, but then end up binge watching the whole thing. So those are nice when people just, like how I felt with the scripts when I first got them, that they just so captivated that they want to read on. They want to watch on.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, for you, it's such a real and lived experience. So I love that you are trying to focus on, the positives that came out of it and just your experience making it, but touching on the fact that these are still very real comments that you've seen or yeah, and I mean for those people it's more like give us a chance, right? I mean, I think that people who are just so close-minded that they can't see that this character could still embody all of the important parts of, you know, let's say the Siobhan that they know from the books, and just giving that opportunity is so important, and keeping that open mind. We will go into We Are Lady parts now because season 2 is premiering tonight for in your time on Channel 4 in the UK. It's such a bold, quirky, groundbreaking series. What does it mean to be a part of a project with such strong Muslim representation?
It's honestly so, I hope you can tell by the smile on my face, it's so joyous. And again, brown and black women are usually the sidekick, but the fact that all there's 5 of us, but we're all the kind of leads, is fantastic. And the spirit of the show is pure joy and sisterhood. It's so special that's the core message. And again, it's not steeped in, it certainly deals with marginalization and prejudice and things like that, but that's not the core of the show. The core of the show is just absolute joy. And that's so important in terms of representation and visibility, that people are allowed to, that Muslim women are allowed to absolutely shine and be beautiful and rich and human and silly and, like you said, bold and quirky. I love that description because that's exactly what these women are. So yeah, just so important. And I'm so proud to be part of the show. I really am.
What do you enjoy most about playing Momtaz and having grown with her across 2 seasons, like from season 1 to season 2? How would you say she's evolved personally and with her goals, especially as Lady Parts manager?
I think there's a definite growth from season 1 to season 2, because the challenge gets, the more success the band get, there's more of a challenge of Momtaz being able to match their energy in terms of making sure they get the gigs that they deserve now, or they're getting, financially compensated for their work and things like that. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, no worries. Just like in terms of growth, like how do you think she's evolved personally as well as with the band? Yeah.
So I think from season 1 to season 2, this season we see her question who she is outside of the band. She's so tied with the band, and wanting to pursue their dreams, that she has to question, is this completely my dream as well? And I think maybe it might happen a lot to certain people who are in more managerial roles, or that your life is so tied to someone else's success or identity that you can almost get lost in that source and forget what your purpose is, or you can become out of alignment with what your ultimate goal was, because you're taken over with someone else's world and dream. So she definitely has to reconcile with what that is for her, and if she's still happy, and I think she deals with a lot of frustration. Even through season 1 we saw it with trying to get the band the gigs, and trying to, they're very underground, and trying to make sure that they find their cult following, their tribe. So yeah, we see her exploring who she is outside the band a bit more, which was really nice to do, because again, I think each one of us actually get to explore our individuality more, which I think's a nice evolution from season 1, because we're all slightly older now, on screen and off screen, that it's only right that towards that late 20s that age, that you start to go, who am I without all these things, or like, I think even the pandemic maybe had us question those things, who am I, what do I want, when that noise is silenced and it's just me, what makes my heart tick? And so I think they're all going through that, which was really nice that Nida, the creator and director, she had us explore, and she trusted us with those as well.
And for your character, Momtaz, she wears a niqab, and so facially viewers only see her eyes. Tell me about this aspect, like to your character, and having it form such a big part of her identity outwardly.
Well, firstly, I don't think we've seen niqabi women on television in the context of pure joy and comedy. So that felt really important to do. And she's and also just her costume. So our costume designer, PC Williams, is I mean, she's BAFTA award winning for the series. She's incredible. And she really, I mean, particularly the costumes in season 2. I don't even say costumes because they're garments. It's what she wears. But in terms of costumes, as in artistically speaking, just incredible. And it's an expression of her. It's not this sense of which I think is really important in terms of our viewership maybe coming from a Western lens. So they might perceive the niqab as wrongly so as modest and lacking expression. You know, I can't see this part of this person. But with Momtaz and how, even just down to how the show's lit, my makeup that I'm using, the garment itself, all show who Momtaz is and her heart and her spirit and her desires, and it's all transmitted through this. And I really hope that changes people's perceptions in terms of niqabi women and that element of expression, that it's not being dulled. And also, you know, a lot of people have said, oh, well, are you going to show your face in this season? And the world, Momtaz doesn't owe the world her face to be loved, to be appreciated, to have the same value as these other women. And I think that's really important, because there was maybe the actor side of things might have been, well, it's beneficial for me to have visibility. People should know who I am. And actually, what's best for the storyline is Momtaz doesn't need to. She doesn't need to take. She might take it off when she's obviously when she's with her grandma and a bit more at home. But I don't think Momtaz needs to take off her niqab in order to relate to viewers, which I think's so beautiful about the show. And I think that was a big exercise in season 1, is how to pitch her so she could be read on screen. So that was maybe me being more theatrical in my body, rather than, you know, if I was completely visible, if I was listening, I'd just maybe go like this, slightly in, but you can't quite see that in the niqab, so I'd have to lean in like this. And so having that idea of being a bit more theatrical was really fun. And I'm naturally really animated anyway, as you can probably tell, so that was great. But yeah, it was just, I just really, the fact that we have a niqabi woman who is so empowered, so confident in who she is. You know, in season 1, she says she feels like Beyoncé, you know, when she wears it. It's so, and I don't want to use the word radical because it shouldn't be, but it is novel to experience on television in a comedy. And it felt so lovely to be part of that. And I'd never want to offend anybody with that portrayal of a niqabi woman. I'd never want someone to feel that we were ever, I don't know if someone ever thought we were making a mockery, because that's not within the spirit we've ever made the show. It's just, you know, with Muslim creators and Muslim cast and crew, you know, it was always about empowerment and expression and sitting in truth. And I just think I don't know, I just love her. I really do. I love her so much.
And I love what Nida said before in like a past interview about not needing to rely on seeing all of Momtaz to know her, and have viewers get to know her in other ways and other reveals. And I liked hearing about your kind of theatrical actions, because I think thought process wise that you obviously have to think differently than your other roles, because your expression has to be shown elsewhere to transmit through the screen and through that medium, like through your eyes and maybe her tone of voice and those fashion choices that you mentioned. Tell me a bit about the cast chemistry that you have and what you've built together.
I could get emotional, but it's because I'm due on. I love those girls so much. We are genuinely just like chosen family and sisters. And what's weird is that, because we filmed season 1 during the pandemic, obviously we had it was COVID tests every day. It was a bit of a nightmare, but so there was this sense of we were close, but we couldn't quite have that same on-set experience that we used to. And because it's been so long in between, it's given us like 3 extra years to grow as like sisters. You support each other's projects. We're always in the group chat. You know, every win of one person, whether it's Angela's got a series out, or Sarah or Faith's doing a play or whatever, Juliet's got a gig, we're always so supportive, and they are just the most special people. They really are. And I think you can tell on screen, like those, whenever someone asks me what's the most fun scenes to film, it's always the ones where we're together, because it's just chaos but also silly. I feel like it's an infectious energy. It's very special, and it's fizzy, and I don't know, it just feels so, the chemistry is just perfect. And I think we all have our own little roles. I don't know, it just fits, and it's beautiful, and I respect them so much. Particularly, you know, they're the band members. They really work hard with their instruments. I think people maybe are fooled into thinking it's TV magic and they're not really playing the instruments. They are at band practice. They work really hard, and I have just so much respect for each of their talents. And obviously what you see in the show is just only a portion of what they can do as people and as artists, and then I've got to see them shine in all their other ways. So just full of respect and love, and whether we go on to do another series or this is it, like they are, I mean, I know lots of people say this, like, oh, they're my friends, they're my family, but there is no way we would ever part. I think we're too tied in now. And again, it's so special because not every show has that. I can't explain it, but it's just a lovely cosmic meeting of certain energies that's just perfect. Yeah.
Real life is kind of the same thing as what the show embodies, which is like the womanhood and the sisterhood. What is your favorite song performed by Lady Parts?
I think Malala Made Me Do It, which is in season 2, because it's a different genre for the band. So I will say, as the band manager, I'm betraying the band here. My musical tastes align more with like R&B, soul, bit of pop, hip hop, less kind of rock era punk. And I actually genuinely love, before literally the Renaissance, but before the resurgence of like particularly great black artists like Beyoncé, you know, reclaiming the country genre, I've always genuinely loved country music. So the fact that was a kind of a country song, I just love seeing the girls shine in that way, because I'd heard them do the punk thing before, but this was a kind of different genre for them to shine in. So it was just really special. And I also loved the way we got to, without any spoilers, but the way we got to shoot that and tease in a guest appearance. It just felt really special. So I think that's my favorite, and I just have fond memories of that day as well.
Do you ever feel like just a hint of jealousy that you're not out there playing the punk music or the music with the band?
100%. I'm like, give me a triangle, please. Like, give me something, glockenspiel. But what's great is that I get to experience it. I get to see them in their glory. And what's lovely, and again, this is why it's so great on set. So when the coverage, obviously we shoot our master and stuff like that, but when we're doing our close-ups on each individual band member, the way we hype up that person, say if it's Faith's coverage, the way like we're at the monitor screaming, going, yes, great work, like all this, we're so ridiculous. Like we must be so annoying to work with. But we're just we're like each other's cheerleaders, so in such a genuine way. Every time it's someone's coverage and it's the band scene, so it's like they're in a music video. We're just there, like absolutely loving each other's work, genuinely loving each other's work. So it's just so special, yeah.
That's so precious. I imagine the camera operators behind are like, can you not be screaming so loud?
Honestly, it is almost a bit like we're school kids sometimes, because it almost doesn't feel like work. We're just chatting, and we're like, oh God, we've got a job, because it's like
you're like, oh, the cameras are rolling. Like, oh, I didn't notice you there.
We're terrible.
That's so special. I mean, I hope you get to do a third season. I can see you have so much joy talking about it. Tell me about the show's creator, writer, director extraordinaire, Nida Manzoor, like collaborating with her and just being able to be a part of her story.
Nida is just a powerhouse, and also just seeing her so we filmed kind of what you'd deem maybe a pilot. It's called a blap here with Channel 4, and it's only 15 minutes of a pilot, so it's kind of snappy. And we filmed that for the series in 2018, right? So that's, God, 6 years ago this year. And she was, again, in the infancy of her directing bag. So a bit more reserved and a bit more, just, I don't know, again, just more green, just like we all were. So to see her from that version of herself to now, which is still just as gracious and generous and open and polite, but to see her own it and just be this superstar is just mad to me. And the way her mind works, the way we will do a take and she has these suggestions just off the cuff in her head and they work. Just amazing. And what she's done from season 1 to season 2 as well. I think it's like doing that sophomore album. It's always like, it must be the worst anxiety as an artist to try and match a piece of art that you've conceived basically your whole life, and then you've got to recreate something just as great in the space of how many months. But she's allowed for the show to evolve. And I think sometimes, I mean, I've watched shows when the seasons don't match. I feel like I can tell and go, they've got whole new writers there. That's not the same, doesn't work. Whereas with this, it's a complete natural evolution. And just in terms of what we want to say as artists as well, she's so open to it. She's so funny, but also, again, doesn't shy away from the urgency of having brown and black women on television in lead roles. She understands the profundity of that, but also allows the show to be as silly as it can be. You know, it's just so many lovely fantasy sequences and like heightened moments that it's honestly such a joy. Her mind, I mean, I hope I get to work with her again in some capacity, but I will continue to be a lifelong fan and feel so lucky that I got to work with her.
And something, you always talk about thought-provoking stories again. And so here's another project where that's something that's so valuable and at your core as well. Before we kind of wrap up, a few more questions. You recently had your debut on Sunday Brunch, which is a popular British TV program that actually runs live. So how was that experience, and also getting to meet some fellow creatives?
It was so fun. I've always been told that that's a nice show to do. And I've done a tiny bit of live TV before, but I think I've been with people as in people in the same project. So I haven't been kind of like the one lonesome like representative. But I loved it. And because growing up, I actually wanted to be like a television presenter or like a news reporter. So even to just be around cameras that had an auto cue, I was like, to the point where I had to tell myself, stop staring at the monitors, like stop staring it down the barrel. But it was really lovely. And what's great about the formats of these like interview shows, everyone's story is so compelling, and you meet people from different facets of the industry or walks of life. And it's an eye-opener. And I think that's the beauty of this industry, as much as it has its difficulties and the rejection and all this sort of stuff. You get to meet people that are so it's from different diverse worlds that you get to experience life in such a rich way. Like it's almost like you get to live how many different lives in the space of one lifetime. It's mad. And I got to learn so many different stories and recipes and stuff, but it was really fun. And actually it made me go, oh, do I want to be a presenter? Like I really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Second career maybe in your future. But I know you got to meet Bradley Richards from Heartstopper, a fantastic show. Bradley Simpson from the Vamps, who actually spoke with, I want to say like 10 years ago now, Kate Nash as well. So music side, not only acting.
Yeah, really. And honestly, each guest was just so lovely. Got to meet Bradley as well. It was his first time on the show as well. Whereas I think all the other guests had done the show before in some point. So, and he was the first person I met actually. And we just got on like this. He was so lovely. And getting to hear his story about, neurodivergence and how he uses that in an empowering way, and how important that advocacy work is within art and off screen. And honestly, each guest, that's what I mean about the show. You kind of do something like that very naively, and then you get to hear everyone's interview and everyone's story. and you just feel like lucky to be around these absolute gems of humanity. It's really great, and we've all like became sort of friends now and gone, oh, when's your gig in London, I'll come, and all that sort of stuff, so that's nice.
I hope it's the first of many times for you to be on Sunday Brunch or similar programs like that. From X, I know you are a fan of Meghan Markle, Beyoncé, Taylor Swift. Tell me about the love and respect you have for these women and what they do, whether that's in music or their activism, maybe both.
Firstly, Beyonce's just queen. Just always loved her. And again, I grew up with like Destiny's Child, even from like late 90s. And again, I'm not saying I look like Beyonce. I mean, after a few drinks, I think I do. But seeing someone who has, you know, skin color like me, it was a radical moment at like how many years old. So always been a fan, and just she's someone who is at the peak of her craft every single time, and someone who could genuinely have retired her legacy at any point and been at a peak, but constantly concerned with elevating and experimenting, and that's someone who truly loves what they do, because at that point you go, I've had enough hits, I'm just gonna sit in my penthouse and do whatever. But even the fact, you know, she's done house music with Renaissance, and then she's done country music, there's speculation she's going to do like a rock album. The fact that she's reclaiming the culture of these music genres and how they started, that's real art. That's what artists do. They find that they maybe speak to spaces where they haven't been invited into and then reclaim them. So that's beautiful. Taylor Swift, I can't help it, I'm a massive Swiftie. I love that girl. I'm seeing her in 2 weeks' time in Liverpool, can't wait. But I got into her, like, even in that, again, I loved country music, so I listened to like her first 2 albums, like when I was at uni, like all the country music. And again, she's someone who evolves and explores different genres. And again, people might slate her and say she's not the best vocalist, she's not this, she's not that, but lyrically speaking, I think she writes beautiful music. And I think if any music can get you through a tough time, whatever it is, like, respect it. And Meghan Markle, I am just absolutely appalled with how the press have treated her since the start of her experience with in Britain, with her partnership with Harry. Again, as a mixed race person in the UK, you can't help but be, again, like I said, appalled, but also understand where that sly, slow, undercutting hatred comes from. The misogynoir of it all, you know, it's and it's really disappointing. And I think it's important to show, again, not that Meghan would ever read my tweets or whatever, but I think it's important to vocalize support of a woman speaking her truth and choosing her happiness over a system which did not make space for her, which did not protect her. And we see that it does a lot of things to protect other members. This isn't me making a comment on the royal family, but it's a system which very famously has protected people in a very staunch way, unwavering way, and not done the same for other members. And it's really disappointing. So I'll forever be a fan of hers. In terms of, I just think she's very graceful, very eloquent. She's always, regardless of before the Prince Harry thing, in terms of her career, she's always been an advocate and on the right side of history for so many causes, particularly women call, you know, female heavy causes. And so I think she's always been someone who has been on the right side of things. So again, the character assassination is just ridiculous. So yeah, from one mixed race princess to another, I'm a fan.
You are an advocate for a number of causes, including accessibility in theater for young people, overall equality for the arts. So can you expand upon the importance for you personally? I know you've touched on it a bit before in terms of visibility. How do you kind of push for and create that positive change?
I think it's really hard because the change doesn't happen overnight. And I think we are in such a fast moving world at the moment. There's always a new thing to kind of have to advocate for, to work towards. And so it almost gets overwhelming for people. My I'm really big on it almost feels like you can't fight everything you want to fight, which is that's the overwhelming thing. In terms of the accessibility thing, the theatre tickets, I don't know what they're like in Canada. The theatre ticket prices in the UK are ridiculously extortionate. If you want a good seat in a good show, you're talking up to £200. And it's just not feasible at all. I mean, I went to the theatre once as a child. My way into this industry was I used to love watching television. And so that was my in. But when there's nothing like seeing live theatre, and the fact that it's not accessible because of the ridiculous cost, and the people that should be consuming this art, that should be provoking their thoughts and should be transforming the way they may view something, or allowing them to feel seen and valued or recognized, they're not the audiences we're getting in. We're only getting in privileged audiences, and it's not right, and it's not the future of the arts. And then we have this discussion of nepo babies. It's like, well, yeah, of course that's going to happen, because there's no social mobility for anyone else to enter the industry. So I almost feel bad that nepo babies get a bad rap, because I think, well, it's not your fault either. It's the whole system that's kind of messed up. But I really hope that something happens with theatre access for young people, because or any just arts access for young people. I think it's such a beautiful way to express yourself, to kind of escape, to view your world in a different way. And I think at the moment, either through education and our government in the UK, they kind of, the arts funding's being cut, the way that more arts orientated qualifications are viewed as like less than. So that messaging comes from really early on, that the arts aren't important. And then when we get those ticket prices, I'm thinking, how many people are not entering this industry or recognizing that there's a place for them? And with that, then we get the same stories. We don't get the stories from more marginalized voices. So we can't redress the balance. And I'm just an advocate for just equality and again, representation. And we're seeing it more and more. But it almost seems like it's still never enough. But yeah, you try.
Are there any kind of like local organizations out there in your community who you're a part of, or who you know of, who are pushing for these causes?
There's a lot of schemes that go on now that help with, I mean, there's certainly a lot of theatres that have like an under 25s kind of, and if you go on a Monday, it's cheaper. I know a theatre I worked at, Sheffield Crucible, which is where Jamie actually started off. They had, and actually this is really important, they have a public dress rehearsal the day before the opening, that's £1 per audience member. And because of that, we had a lot of younger audience members in who watched the show. And if it wasn't for that younger audience going, oh my God, I feel seen, that's what I'm like at school, that's what my friends like, we wouldn't have grown in this weird grassroots way that we did, that then allowed us to go to the West End. And I'm so fierce about this, because if it hadn't been £1 to enter, half those young people would never have got that opportunity to see that show, feel seen, and the show wouldn't have been catapulted in the way it would have been. And it's so important. Like we've got to do something about it. There's certain, I mean, Actors for Change is also a good one as well. That there's so many different accessible things, and theatres are getting better at it, but also they've lost a lot of money. Their rents have gone up. The COVID's hit them as well. They're trying to recoup. So the whole thing's quite difficult. But and again, when you've got a government which doesn't quite support the arts and thinks it's more of a frivolous activity and people should retrain in certain other disciplines, the messaging's coming from the top that it's just not worth investing in. So it's difficult.
I can only imagine. I think like the arts are struggling in so many places, but as long as you keep talking about it and having that discussion, I think is a key part moving forward and to push for that change. I have one more question for you, our signature question. If you could be any ice cream flavor, which would you be and why?
Salted caramel, because it's my favorite, but also you've got the caramelly swirl, you've got the sweetness of that, but then you've also got the tang of the saltiness, because sometimes it can be a bit salty. And yeah, and it also comes in different forms. You can have more of a budget version of it now, or you can go for like a luxurious, like, more of it. And so sometimes I'm more in my, again, this is more in my budget. This is my budget look. And then sometimes I can be a bit more put together. But yeah, I love that salted caramel's become more popular now. I just love that bit of salty kick. It's nice.
That's a fantastic way to end things off. Thank you so much, Lucy, for taking the time to chat. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so honestly, thank you. It's been a really lovely interview. Thank you.
Of course, well, hopefully we can catch up in the future. But until then, for all those watching and listening, you can catch Lucy in Rebus on BBC, and We Are Lady Parts Season 2 is out starting today, Channel 4 in the UK and Peacock in the United States. And we will see you next time.